The celestial beacon drifted through the silent expanse of the Terran Exclusion Zone, its crystalline hull shimmering with the faint pulse of bioluminescent energy. Commander Zapkel of the Zaperian Ascendancy watched the starfield through the hexagonal viewport, his faceted eyes reflecting the distant glow of Sol. The system was forbidden, marked by ancient warnings etched into the galactic archives in languages even the Ascendancy's most learned scholars struggled to decipher. Sleeping giants stir beneath the soil of Terra, the warnings whispered. Do not wake them. Zapkel's mandibles twitched in irritation. Superstition. The Ascendancy had conquered 1,000 systems, their crystalline fleets unstoppable, their technology beyond reproach. What threat could a backwater world like Terra possibly pose? Commander? Scientist Quilex intoned, his voice resonating through the chamber's organic acoustics. The anomaly persists. Zapkel turned, his armored carapace clicking as he approached the central hololith. Suspended within the translucent projection was a single, impossible signature, a pulse of energy emanating from the third planet. Human, but not like the scattered colonies the Ascendancy had already subdued. This was something deeper, older. Analysis, Zapkel demanded. Quilex manipulated the hololith with delicate, chitinous fingers. The energy signature matches no known human technology. It predates their spacefaring era by millennia. And yet, the projection flickered, revealing deep subterranean structures. Vast, geometric, dormant. It is active. Zapkel's crest of sensory spines flared in unease. The humans had been primitive when the Ascendancy first encountered them. Fractured, violent, clinging to chemical propulsion and fission weapons. Easy prey, but this was not the work of apes scrambling in the dirt. Send a probe, Zapkel ordered. Full spectrum scan. I want to know what we're dealing with. The probe launched from the celestial beacon's underbelly, its crystalline form gliding toward Terra like a shard of broken glass. It pierced the atmosphere, descending upon the coordinates of the anomaly, a remote region humans called the Himalayas. The data returned in cascading waves. Quilex's mandibles went slack. Commander, the hololith reconfigured, revealing a structure buried beneath the ice, a monolith of black alloy untouched by time, its surface etched with the same warnings found in the archives. And at its base, a single, pulsing sigil, authorization required. Then, the probe's feed dissolved into static. Zapkel's spines flattened against his skull. What happened? Quilex's voice was hollow. It didn't shut down, Commander. It was erased. A chime echoed through the chamber, an alert from the ship's perimeter sensors. Something was coming. Outside the celestial beacon, the void rippled. Space itself twisted, warping like liquid beneath an unseen force. Then, with a silent detonation of displaced reality, a vessel emerged. It was not Superior. It was not anything the Ascendancy recognized. Sleek, angular, forged from a material that absorbed light rather than reflected it. The ship hung in the darkness like a blade unsheathed. Its engines burned cold blue, a signature the hololith identified instantly, but not the humans the Ascendancy knew. This was something else, and it was awake. Zapkel's claws tightened around the command rail. The warnings had been real, and the Ascendancy had just made a terrible mistake. The celestial beacon shuddered as the alien vessel locked onto it with predatory stillness. Zapkel's secondary eyelids flicked shut for a fraction of a second, an instinctive blink against the impossible sight before him. This was no derelict, no artifact of a dead civilization. The ship was alive. Its hull drank the light, a black so deep it seemed to carve a hole in space itself. Only the cold blue pulse of its engines betrayed its presence, a rhythmic throb like the heartbeat of some vast hibernating beast. The design was all brutal angles and recessed weapon ports, a stark contrast to the Zaperians' flowing crystalline architecture, where their technology sang with organic harmony. This thing hissed with the promise of violence. Quilex data. Sensors whirred frantically, their crystalline surfaces flickering with panic. "Commander, it's energy signature." Zapkel didn't need the readings. He could feel it. The air in the command chamber had thickened, charged with an oppressive weight. The hololith screens fizzed with interference, as though the very presence of the human ship disrupted reality. Then the scans resolved, and the truth struck like a plasma lance to the spine. The vessel wasn't just advanced, it was old. Older than the Ascendance's oldest records, older than the ruins on dead worlds where the first civilizations had crumbled to dust. Its hull bore scars, deep, jagged furrows, that spoke of battles fought in an era when the Zaperians had barely crawled from their primal oceans, and yet it moved with eerie precision, gliding forward as if time had no meaning. A proximity alert blared. The human ship was closing. Zapkel's claws flexed, his instincts torn between retreat and defiance. The Ascendancy had faced countless species, absorbed or erased them all. But this was different. The hololith flickered again, and for a single, horrifying moment, the human vessel's silhouette shifted. Not physically, but in perception, as if reality itself struggled to contain its true form. Then, like a predator revealing its fangs, the ship's forward array activated. A single pulse of blue light lanced out. Not a weapon. The celestial beacon systems convulsed. Every screen, every console, every crystalline interface lit up with the same repeating glyph, a symbol the translation matrix scrambled to interpret. Quilek's voice was a whisper. The glyph resolved, and then the void screamed. From the depths of space, hidden by cloaking fields so advanced, they bent light itself. More ships emerged, each identical to the first, their hulls drinking the starlight, their engines burning that same cold, relentless blue. The hololith zoomed out, the tactical display expanding to show the true scale of the nightmare. They weren't just facing a single relic. They were facing an armada, and at its heart, something larger. A monstrous construct, its shape defying geometry, its surface crawling with shifting patterns like living shadow. Zapkel's blood ran cold. The warnings had been real, and the sleeping giants, they were awake. The first human ship hailed them, not with words. The celestial beacon's shields flared, and then shattered like glass. The last thing Zapkel saw before the world dissolved into chaos was the hololith's final, damning analysis. Estimated age of vessel: Fei years. The humans hadn't just survived their extinction. They had evolved beyond it. And now, after millennia of silence, they had returned. To finish what they started, the celestial beacon reeled as the first salvo struck, its crystalline shields fracturing in a cascade of blue-green light. Zapkel's claws dug into the command console, the bioluminescent interface flickering under the strain. Around him, the bridge crew moved in frantic silence, their chitinous limbs darting across translucent control panels, their antennae twitching with suppressed panic. The human vessel, no, the ancient human vessel, loomed on the view screen, its silhouette a jagged nightmare of blackened alloy and pulsating energy veins. It moved with impossible precision, its thrusters flaring not with the steady burn of ion drives, but with something else, something that warped space itself, leaving after images of distorted starlight in its wake. Quilek, the ship's lead scientist, stood frozen beside the hololith. His four eyes locked onto the scrolling data. His mandibles trembled as he parsed the readings. This wasn't supposed to happen. The Zaperian Dominion had studied the ruins of Terra for centuries. They had sifted through the skeletal remains of human cities, analyzed their crude combustion engines, their primitive fission reactors. They had dismissed them as a dead-end species, violent, reckless, doomed by their own short-sightedness. And yet here they were. The second salvo hit. This time, the celestial beacon's hull screamed. The organic crystal plating, designed to absorb and redistribute energy, buckled under forces it was never meant to withstand. A deep resonant crack echoed through the ship as fissures spiderwebbed across the bulkheads, leaking thin streams of luminous coolant. Zapkel's secondary heart pounded in his thorax. They're not just surviving our weapons, they're adapting to them. The hololith updated in real time, the human fleet shifting formation with eerie synchronicity. Their ships moved like a single organism, their tactics fluid, unpredictable. No hesitation, no wasted motion, a transmission, not in Zaperian, not in any known galactic dialect, but in human speech. A voice deep and resonant filled the bridge. "This is Major Helen Carter of the Terran Reclamation Fleet." The words were archaic, the accent strange, yet the translation matrix parsed them instantly. "You have violated sovereign space. You have ignored warnings carved into the stars. You have trespassed where you were not welcome. You will stand down." Zapkel's spines flattened against his carapace. This wasn't a request, it was a command. Quilex finally found his voice. "High Commander, their technology, it's not just advanced, it's alive. The ships, the weapons, they're interfacing with the crew on a neural level. They're not just piloting those vessels, they're merged with them." Zapkel's mind raced. The humans hadn't just survived extinction, they had transcended it. And now, after 12,000 years of silence, they had returned, not as the primitive, fractured species the Dominion had dismissed, but as something else entirely, something more. Outside, the human fleet pulsed with dark energy, their weapons humming to life once more. The celestial beacon had a choice. Zapkel made his decision. He opened a channel and prayed the humans would listen. The silence on the celestial beacon's bridge was absolute. Zapkel's claws hovered over the comm panel, the crystalline surface cool beneath his touch. His secondary heart thrummed in his chest, a rapid staccato that echoed the pulsing blue-green luminescence of the ship's core. The Dominion had faced empires before, had shattered fleets, glassed worlds, rewritten the fates of entire species. This was different. The human vessels hung in the void like specters, their hulls not merely armored but breathing, shifting subtly as if alive. Their weapons, those monstrous organic-looking cannons, thrummed with a resonance that made the Zaperian ship's crystalline sensors shriek in protest. Quilex had been right. This wasn't just technology, it was symbiosis, a neural fusion of flesh and machine. Zapkel's mandibles twitched. The Dominion's archives had spoken of humanity as a fractured warlike species, brilliant but chaotic, their potential wasted in petty conflicts. The records had been clear. They will never unite. They will never ascend. Yet here they were, not just united, transformed. A flicker on the view screen. One of the human ships, designated Eclipse, detached from formation, gliding forward with eerie precision. Its hull shimmered, dark as void, forged obsidian, veins of crimson energy pulsing beneath its surface like blood through arteries. Then, the voice returned. "Zaperian Dominion vessel. This is Major Helen Carter of the Terran Reclamation Fleet." The tone was calm, controlled and utterly terrifying. Zapkel forced his spines to remain rigid. "Major Carter, you trespass in Dominion space." Then, laughter, not through the comms. Inside his skull, Quilex gasped, his crystalline carapace vibrating as the neural intrusion rippled through the ship's biolink network. The humans weren't just speaking, they were in the system. "Trespass," Carter's voice echoed, now layered with 1,000 whispers. "You stand in the graveyard of our ancestors. You built your empire atop our bones." The Eclipse's hull split open, not with weapons, but with tendrils of blackened metal, writhing like serpents before lashing outward. Zapkel's tactical display flared crimson as the tendrils pierced the celestial beacon's shields, bypassing them entirely. The ship shuddered, its crystalline power core flickering as foreign code flooded its neural architecture. Quilex's voice was a strangled hiss. They're hacking us. Not just the systems, the core, the living crystal, it's responding to them." Zapkel's blood ran cold. The Dominion's technology was alive, a fusion of organic growth and engineered precision, and the humans understood it. They commanded it. The beacon's own systems turned against it, luminescent pathways darkening as the ship's consciousness recoiled. Alarms blared, then died mid-chime, smothered by an unseen force. The view screen flickered, replaced by a feed from the human vessel. No, not a cockpit. Major Carter sat at its center, her body encased in a biomechanical exosuit, tendrils of neural interface woven into her temples, her eyes glowing faintly with the same crimson energy as the ship, locked onto Zapkel's. "You thought us extinct." Her lips didn't move. The words came from everywhere. "You were wrong." The Eclipse moved, not with thrusters, not with engines. Space itself warped around it, the vessel slipping between dimensions like a shadow through smoke. 1 second it was there, the next, and in its place, a silence so deep it felt like the void itself was holding its breath. Zapkel's claws dug into the command console. The humans hadn't just returned, they had evolved, and the galaxy would never be the same. The silence aboard the Celestial Reverence was absolute. Zapkel's secondary heart thrummed erratically, his crystalline carapace vibrating with suppressed energy. The human vessel, no, the abomination, had vanished, leaving behind only the ghost of its presence in the form of distorted sensor echoes. His command deck, once a symphony of bioluminescent efficiency, now pulsed with erratic flares of blue-green energy, as if the ship itself were struggling to comprehend what it had just witnessed. Quilex, his scientist, stood frozen at the analysis terminal, his manipulator limbs trembling over the holographic display. The data was impossible. The Eclipse had not simply cloaked or jumped. It had unfolded from reality, slipping between the layers of space, time like a blade through water. The energy signatures left behind were unlike anything in the Zaperian archives. They pulsed with a rhythm that defied known physics, a resonance that whispered of something ancient, something wrong. Zapkel's mind raced. The humans had been gone for centuries, vanished in the wake of the Great Purge, their homeworld scoured to glass by the combined might of the Galactic Accord. They should have been extinct, a footnote in history, a cautionary tale. The Eclipse had moved with the precision of a predator. No hesitation, no wasted motion. It had looked at them, through them, and then simply ceased to exist in this plane. A warning beacon flickered to life on the main display, its crystalline surface fracturing into jagged red lines. "High Commander," the ship's intelligence intoned, its voice laced with an unfamiliar static. "Temporal anomalies detected. Local space, time integrity compromised." Zapkel's spines flared. Before he could react, the Eclipse reappeared. Not in front of them, among them. It materialized like a nightmare-given form, its obsidian hull shimmering with crimson veins, its edges blurred as though reality refused to acknowledge its existence. It hung there, motionless, at the center of the Zaperian formation, surrounded by a dozen warships that suddenly seemed pitifully fragile. A single silent ripple of distorted space. The nearest Zaperian frigate twisted, its crystalline hull warping like molten glass before shattering into a million glittering fragments. No explosion, no fire, just dissolution. Quilex's voice was a whisper. "They're not just evolved, they're unbound." Zapkel's claws flexed. He had faced death before. He had commanded fleets against the void, borne horrors of the Outer Rim. But this was something else. The Eclipse wasn't just a ship, it was a reckoning, and it had come for them all. The bridge of the celestial will was silent, save for the faint hum of its crystalline core, a sound that had always been a comfort to Zapkel, a reminder of Zaperian mastery over the cosmos. Now it felt like the last breath of a dying world. Before them, the Eclipse loomed, its obsidian hull drinking in the light of distant stars. The human vessel didn't move. It didn't need to. The first frigate had been erased in an instant, its elegant bio, luminescent structure unraveling like thread beneath a blade. The second followed. Not from weapons fire, not from any recognizable attack, but from something deeper, something wrong. The ship simply ceased. Its energy signatures flickered, its crystalline lattice collapsing inward, as though the universe itself had forgotten its right to exist. Zapkel's mandibles twitched, his neural tendrils pulsing with a primal instinctive terror. This wasn't war. This was erasure. Quilex's claws trembled over the sensor array, the bioluminescent readouts casting jagged shadows across his chitinous face. Their technology, it doesn't obey known physics, he murmured, voice brittle. They're bending causality, rewriting local reality. A third ship vanished. Then a fourth. No alarms, no desperate transmissions, just silence. Zapkel had studied human history, their crude combustion engines, their fragile orbital stations, their petty wars fought with chemical explosives. He had laughed at their primitive struggles, dismissed them as a species too chaotic to ever ascend. And yet, here they were. Here it was. The eclipse hung before them, like a black hole given form, its crimson veins pulsing in time with some unfathomable heartbeat. A flicker, a distortion. The human ship shifted, not in space. One moment it was there, the next it was elsewhere. Its position impossible, its trajectory defying logic. A Zaperian cruiser fired, its crystalline lances cutting through the void, only for the beams to twist mid-flight, bending back upon themselves, searing through their own hull in a grotesque mockery of physics. Quilex let out a sound no Zaperian throat should have been capable of producing. They're not just rewriting space, they're rewriting rules. Zapkel's mind raced, the ancient beacons, the warnings carved into dead worlds, the whispers of sleeping giants had spoken of this, not of a species to be conquered, but of a force to be feared, and the Zaperian Empire had ignored them. A new transmission cut through the silence, not from the eclipse, but from the human outpost below. Major Helen Carter's voice was calm, almost gentle. You were warned. The eclipse pulsed once more, and the Zaperian fleet began to unmake. The eclipse hung in the void like a wound in reality, its silhouette flickering between existence and something other. The Zaperian fleet, once a glittering armada of crystalline might, now drifted in disarray. Ships listing, their bioluminescent cores dimming, their perfect geometric formations shattered. Zapkel's command spire pulsed with emergency signals, the translucent panels casting jagged blue-green shadows across his face. His mandibles twitched, the instinctive Zaperian response to overwhelming dread. The tactical displays were useless now. The eclipse didn't move. It simply was where it chose to be, its position untethered from the laws of motion, its weapons systems defying every known principle of energy projection. A single thought reverberated through his mind, cold and undeniable: we were wrong. Not just about the humans, about everything. The ancient beacons had not been warnings of a rival empire. They had been gravestones. Quilex staggered to his side, his carapace plates vibrating with suppressed panic. His ocular lenses flickered as he parsed the sensor data, or what remained of it. The eclipse's emissions weren't just disrupting their systems, they were rewriting them. Energy signatures bled into impossible spectrums, matter decayed without cause. Space itself seemed to remember the human ship's presence, as if it had always been there, waiting. High Commander, Quilex rasped, his voice modulator crackling with distortion. The beacon archives, the fragments we recovered from the dead worlds, they spoke of this. Not as prophecy, as history. Zapkel's claws dug into the crystalline console. He had seen those records, dismissed them as myth. The sleeping giants, the ones who shaped reality. And now they had woken below. On the scarred surface of the human outpost, Major Helen Carter watched the sky through the fractured remains of a viewport. The Zaperian bombardment had ceased. Their ships were too busy dying. She exhaled, her breath fogging in the thin, irradiated air. The eclipse had answered, Not just their distress call, their legacy. Captain Daniel Felger limped to her side, his armor scorched, one arm hanging useless at his side. He followed her gaze upward, to where the eclipse pulsed like a second sun. "They really didn't know, did they?" he muttered. Helen didn't answer. The Zaperians had come expecting to crush a fledgling species. Instead, they had stumbled into the shadow of something far older. Something that had allowed humanity to survive. A new signal cut through the static, not from the eclipse, but from the void beyond. A transmission, ancient and vast, resonating across frequencies no living Zaperian had ever recorded. Quilek's sensor array screamed in protest as it attempted to decode the message. The language was alien, yet familiar. A warning, a reminder, and then, with glacial inevitability, the stars themselves began to shift. Zapkel's blood ran cold. The humans hadn't built the eclipse. They had inherited it. The stars did not simply move, they unfolded. Zapkel's crystalline command throne vibrated beneath him as the eclipse's energy signature swelled. Its blue-green luminescence deepening into something darker, something older. The alien warship's organic hull pulsed like a living thing, veins of silver light threading through its structure, as if responding to a call no Zaperian could hear. Quilek's claws trembled over his console. His neural tendrils, usually a calm indigo, flickered with erratic violet panic. The data pouring in was impossible. The eclipse was not just activating, it was awakening, and the signal it answered to did not originate from human technology. It came from Earth. Major Helen Carter stood frozen in the ruins of the outpost, her breath shallow. The transmission wasn't just sound, it was pressure, a subsonic hum that resonated in her bones. She had felt this before, not in training, not in combat. Fragments of half-remembered myths whispered at the edges of her mind, stories of gods sleeping beneath mountains, of cities buried in ice, of warnings carved into stone millennia before the first pyramids rose. Humanity had always thought them legends. They were not. Captain Felger staggered beside her, his good hand gripping his rifle like a lifeline. "Carter," his voice was raw. "What the hell is that?" She didn't answer. Above them, the eclipse's silhouette twisted, its geometry shifting in ways that defied physics. The ship was no longer a weapon. It was a doorway. Zapkel's crew erupted into chaos. "High Commander," a junior officer's bioluminescent markings flared crimson with terror. "The stellar cartography is changing. The local star field, it doesn't match our archives." Zapkel's secondary eyes snapped to the holographic display. The officer was right. The constellations were wrong. Stars that had burned in fixed positions for eons now flickered, realigning into patterns no Zaperian astronomer had ever recorded. And at the center of it all, the eclipse hung like a lodestone, its energy signature syncing with something buried deep beneath Terra's surface. Quilek's voice was a whisper. "It's a beacon." The humans had not built their empire on ruins. They had built it on a grave. Helen's helmet display flickered as her suit system struggled to filter the transmission. The language was alien, yet something in her hindbrain recognized it. Not words. The eclipse shuddered. Its crystalline superstructure split along seams no engineer could have designed, revealing a core of blackened alloy etched with sigils that burned when seen. The Zaperian fleet scanners shorted out in unison, their organic circuits recoiling from the data like flesh from a brand. Zapkel's mandibles clenched. This was not human. This was not anything his species had encountered in 10,000 years of galactic dominance, and it was waking up. Felger's grip on his rifle faltered. "We're not the first, are we?" Helen exhaled. The truth was there, in the static between stars, in the way the eclipse's energy pulsed in time with something far below Earth's crust. No, she watched as the sky fractured. We're the last. The Zaperians had come to conquer a young species. They had stumbled onto a pilgrimage, and the gods were coming home. The sky above Earth split like an overripe fruit. Zapkel's command spire trembled, its crystalline latticework groaning under forces no living engineer had accounted for. The eclipse. No. The thing wearing its corpse unfolded in ways that bypassed three-dimensional logic, segments of its hull inverted, revealing geometries that stung the eyes, while its core pulsed with a light that cast no shadows, only absence. The Zaperian fleet's bioluminescent arrays dimmed in response, their energy signatures guttering like candles in a storm. Quilek's data screens erupted with warnings, their organic circuits spasming as they attempted to parse the impossible. His neural tendrils, normally a calm electric blue, flickered crimson with overload. "This isn't technology," he rasped, his voice barely audible over the ship's shuddering. "This is memory." Below Earth's atmosphere rippled, not from weapons, fire, not from Zaperian bombardment. From answer, Helen Carter stood frozen on the observation deck, her reflection warping in the fractured glass. The planet beneath her feet no longer looked like home. Veins of gold and black pulsed across its surface, continents shifting like scales on a waking beast. The oceans churned, not with tides, but with something deeper, something rising. Felger's grip on his rifle had gone bloodless. "They buried them," he whispered. "Not in tombs, in us." The realization hit Helen like a bullet. The endless cyclical wars. Humanity had never been alone. They had been custodians, Zackles, mandibles locked. His species had waged war across 1,000 stars, shattered empires, rewritten the laws of physics to suit their will. Yet now, as the eclipse's core hummed a frequency that vibrated in his marrow, he understood the depth of his error. The beacons hadn't been warnings. They had been invitations, a final test, and the Zaperians had failed. His fleet's crystalline shields buckled, not under attack, but under acknowledgement. The void itself seemed to exhale, and in that breath, 1,000 alien voices whispered, "You were not called." Quilek's screens went dark. One by one, the Zaperian ships powered down, their bioluminescent cores dimming to embers. No explosions, no violence, just silence. The scientist turned to his commander, his neural tendrils limp with dread. "They're not killing us," he said. Zapkel's carapace felt brittle. Worse, they were being ignored. On Earth, the sky burned, not with fire, but with sigils, ancient, hungry things that spiraled outward from the planet's core. The eclipse shuddered once more, then changed, its structure flowing like liquid metal into a shape that made Helen's eyes water. Felger exhaled sharply. "They're not our gods." Helen nodded, her throat tight. "No, they're our family, and they were coming home." The war ended not with a bang, but with a sigh. The Zaperian fleet hung lifeless, their crystalline hulls gone dull. No resistance, no final stand. Just the quiet, crushing weight of understanding. They had never been the predators. They had been the prey, and the hunters had finally woken up. The silence was worse than any scream. Zapkel's command spire, once thrumming with the pulse of bioluminescent energy, now stood dark. The crystalline walls, which had shimmered with the electric blue of Zaperian superiority, had dulled to a sickly gray. His claws flexed against the smooth surface of his console, the organic metal cold beneath his touch. Across the bridge, Quilek stood motionless, his neural tendrils coiled tight against his skull. His compound eyes reflected the view outside. The human vessel, the eclipse, no longer a ship, but something else. Its hull had unfolded, its edges bleeding into fractal patterns that defied geometry. It was no longer metal, it was no longer machine. It was a doorway, and through it, something stirred. Helen Carter's breath fogged the inside of her helmet. The air on the bridge of the eclipse had turned thick, charged with an energy that made her teeth ache. The sigils in the sky pulsed in time with her heartbeat, their light painting the command deck in hues of gold and crimson. Felger stood beside her, his grip white-knuckled around his rifle. "They're not just waking up," he muttered. "They're remembering." She didn't answer. She couldn't. The ship, no, the bridge, was alive. The walls breathed, the floor hummed, and beneath it all, a voice, vast and ancient, whispered in a language she had never learned but somehow knew. Not Earth, not humanity's. Cradle. The Zaperian fleet had stopped firing. Their weapons, once primed to scour the planet clean, hung useless in the void. Their crystalline matrices, designed to channel the raw power of blue-green energy cores, flickered and died. Zapkel's mandibles clicked in a sound no Zaperian had made in millennia. Fear on the view screen, the Eclipse's transformation completed. What had been a warship was now a lattice of impossible angles, a structure that existed in dimensions beyond 3. And at its heart, something moved, a presence. Quilek's voice was a whisper. "We were wrong." Zapkel didn't need to ask what he meant. They had thought humanity weak, fragile, a young species, barely worth the effort of conquest. But the beacons, the ancient warnings etched into dead worlds, had not been about them. They had been about what slept beneath them. And now it was awake. Felger's rifle clattered to the floor. Helen didn't blame him. Her own legs trembled, her body caught between awe and primal terror. The air before them rippled, and then, pale, 5-fingered. Human. The fingers were too long, the skin too perfect, unmarred by time or touch. And when the figure stepped forward, Helen's mind buckled. It wore a face she knew, but the eyes were stars. The Zaperian fleet shuddered, not from weapons fire, not from impact, from recognition. The thing, the entity, standing on the bridge of the eclipse, turned its gaze upward, and across 1,000 ships, 1,000 viewports, 1,000 terrified commanders, it smiled. And then it spoke, a single word. His carapace cracked, not from outside force. From within, Helen fell to her knees. The presence didn't speak to her. It didn't need to. She understood. This was no invasion, no revenge. This was a homecoming, and the Zaperians. They had not been conquerors. They had been caretakers, failed ones. The figure, the Terra, born, lifted its hand. The sky screamed. The trial began. The sky did not break. It unfolded, like the peeling back of reality's skin. The void above the Zaperian fleet split along seams no living mind had ever perceived. Through the fissure poured not light, not darkness, but something older, a presence that resonated in the marrow of bones, in the hum of crystalline power cores, in the electric pulse of every thought. Zapkel's mandibles trembled. His neural tendrils, woven through the command throne of the Eclipse, spasmed as if trying to recoil. The ship's bioluminescent systems flickered, their usual teal brilliance dimming beneath a deeper, hungrier glow, a blue so dark it verged on black, shot through with veins of gold. The thing wearing Helen's face raised its hand higher, and the stars answered. Quilek's data slate shattered in his grip. He barely noticed. His tertiary eyes, adapted for deep space spectral analysis, burned as they tried, and failed, to process the energy signatures flaring across the fleet scanners. The readings made no sense. They couldn't. A Zaperian warship's crystalline shielding was designed to disperse energy attacks across its hexagonal lattice structure, diffusing even planet, cracking beams into harmless resonance. But the golden light seeping through the cracks in the sky did not strike. It remembered, and memory, it seemed, could not be dispersed. The resplendent claw, flagship of the Third Conquest Fleet, was the first to die. Not in fire, not in thunder, in silence. One moment, its bioluminescent hull pulsed with the steady rhythm of a living warship. The next, its crystalline plating turned dull, then gray, then a billion glittering particles suspended in the void like the ashes of a dead god. Quilek's mandibles parted in a soundless scream. This was not warfare. This was erasure. Helen's lungs refused to work. She knelt on the Eclipse's bridge, her fingers splayed against the deck, her body trembling, not from fear, but from something far worse, recognition. The presence in the sky was not alien. It was hers, fragments of understanding slotted into place behind her eyes, each one a blade. The beacons had not been warnings. They had been lullabies. The Zaperians had not been conquerors. They had been shepherds. Terra had never been asleep. It had been dreaming. A hand gripped her shoulder. Captain Felger, his face pale beneath his helmet's visor, hauled her upright. His lips moved, but the words dissolved before they reached her. The air itself had grown thick, heavy, like the charged silence before a storm. Then the figure, the Terraborn, turned its star, filled eyes toward Zapkel, not with sound, with sensation. Zapkel's carapace split wider, not from pain, from revelation. The Zaperian commander collapsed. His neural tendrils, still fused with the Eclipse's systems, convulsed as the ship's organic circuitry writhed beneath the golden light. The vessel's crystalline panels, once flawless, now rippled with fractures, each one spreading like frost across glass. Zapkel's mind fractured with them. Images flooded his consciousness. Not memories, but echoes. A galaxy young and bright. A pact sworn in fire and silence. A duty failed. The Terra-born stepped closer. Its bare feet left no imprint on the deck. But where it passed, the ship's bioluminescence changed, shifting from Zaperian teal to a deep pulsating gold. The same gold now dripping from Zapkel's cracked carapace, the same gold pooling in Helen's veins, the same gold rewriting the sky. The trial, it seemed, was not for humanity. It never had been. The Zaperians had been weighed, and found wanting. The Terraborn lifted its hand a final time, and the galaxy breathed. The golden light did not fade. It expanded. Zapkel's fractured mind could no longer distinguish between thought and sensation. His neural tendrils, still fused with the Eclipse's dying systems, pulsed with the rhythm of a dying star, each throb sending fresh waves of agony through his carapace. The ship's crystalline hull, once a masterpiece of Zaperian engineering, now groaned like a living thing in its death throes. Bioluminescent veins that had pulsed with teal energy dimmed, replaced by the relentless gold that seeped into every fracture, every circuit, every atom. The Terraborn stood motionless at the heart of it all. Its presence was not an intrusion, it was a reclamation. Zapkel's mandibles trembled as the truth settled into him, cold and inevitable. The beacons had not been warnings, they had been judgments. And now, after millennia of silence, the verdict was being delivered. Beyond the shattered viewports, the battle had frozen. Human and Zaperian ships alike hung suspended in the void, their weapons silent, their engines dark. The golden light had woven through them all, threading between hulls like celestial vines, binding them in a stillness that defied physics. Quilek's voice crackled weakly over the comms, his usual scientific detachment shattered. Zapkel, the energy signatures. They're rewriting local space-time, the readings. They're not possible. Zapkel did not answer. His compound eyes, their lenses fractured, fixed on the Terra. Born, it turned its head, not toward him, toward Earth. On the bridge of the Phoenix, Major Helen Carter exhaled. The golden light coiled around her fingers like liquid fire, but it did not burn. It remembered her. She had seen the visions too. The ancient pact, the guardians who had faltered, the sleepers beneath the earth, waiting. Captain Felger stood beside her, his rifle forgotten in his grip. His face was pale, his breath shallow. "Major, what the hell is that?" Helen didn't answer. She didn't need to. The Terraborn had already spoken, not in words, but in the weight of millennia pressing against her bones. Humanity had never been the experiment. They had been the safeguard. The Zaperian homeworld, crystalline spires gleaming under twin suns, received the signal at the same moment as every other species in the galaxy. A single pulse, a reactivation code older than their civilization. The beacons answered, deep within the crust of dead worlds, in the hearts of gas giants, buried beneath the ice of forgotten moons, systems older than language stirred to life. The galaxy had been watched, and now it would be remembered. Zapkel's carapace split further, golden light spilling from the cracks. The last thing he saw was the Terra, born turning its gaze back to him. Not in anger, then the eclipse, the Zaperian fleet, the war itself, not in fire, not in destruction, but in the quiet exhale of a debt finally paid. Epilogue's end. The golden light lingered, then, like a sigh, it withdrew. Human ships remained, Zaperian ships did not. The beacons hummed, their purpose fulfilled, and somewhere, beneath the soil of Terra, something ancient and patient closed its eyes once more. It would sleep, but never as soundly as before. The galaxy had learned its lesson. And humanity. Helen Carter smiled, flexing her fingers as the last of the gold faded from her veins. They had always known, the silence after, the void where the Zaperian fleet had been was not empty. It was alive with absence. A resonance lingered, not of destruction but of erasure, as if the universe itself had paused to reconsider the shape of things. The beacons, their humming now subdued, pulsed once more, not in warning but in quiet acknowledgement. Their light, once gold, faded to the soft blue of a Terran twilight. On the bridge of the eclipse, Helen Carter exhaled. The weight of what had been done settled into her bones, not as guilt, but as a grim understanding. The Zaperians had gambled on humanity's mercy. They had lost, but mercy had not been absent, only different. The surviving human ships drifted, their crews silent. No cheers, no triumph, just the slow, steady breathing of those who had stared into the abyss and found, to their own surprise, that the abyss had blinked first. Across the galaxy, sensors registered the event. The Zaperian homeworld, its crystalline spires gleaming under distant suns, received no distress calls. No final transmissions, only silence. A single unencrypted broadcast echoing across the void. A voice, human, weary but unbroken. This is Admiral Carter of the Terran Sovereignty. The war is over. Let it be remembered. The transmission ended. In the depths of space, something shifted. The beacons, their purpose fulfilled, dimmed, but did not die. They would remain silent sentinels, a monument to the day the galaxy learned the truth. Humanity did not conquer. It endured. And in the end, that was enough. Final note, far below Terra's surface, the ancient presence stirred once more. Not in anger, not in vigilance, but in something almost like satisfaction. It had waited, it had watched, and now, at last, it could rest. For a little while longer.